Imagine a world where the seemingly invincible Roman Empire, greatest military machine known to man, trembled at the fury of a single woman. Not a general, not an emperor, but a tribal queen from the cold, damp lands of Britannia. This is the story history almost forgot, a tale of unimaginable defiance that carved a permanent scar into the annals of Rome itself. For decades, the Roman legions had steadily pushed their might across Britain, subjugating tribes, enforcing laws, and bleeding the island dry of its resources. They believed Britannia was a conquered land, its people pacified, its wild spirit broken. They were wrong. Welcome to Whispered Chronicles, echoes of forgotten lore. And on this journey, we're not just telling a story, we're reliving a revolution. This is the chronicle of Boudica, Queen of the Iceni, a woman whose name still echoes through the fog-shrouded fields of Britain. A warrior who rose from unimaginable tragedy to unleash a storm of vengeance that burned 3 Roman cities to ashes and, for a terrifying moment, threatened to wipe Rome from the island forever. The year is 60 AD. Imagine a world under the absolute dominion of the Roman Empire, a sprawling behemoth ruled by the infamous Emperor Nero. Across the Channel, in the misty lands of Britain, the Roman Governor Suetonius Paulinus enforces Nero's will with an iron fist. It's a time of conquest, of legionaries marching on newly paved roads, and of ancient cultures clashing with the might of Rome. In the eastern part of this newly conquered province, in the region we now call East Anglia, lived the Iceni. They were a proud Celtic tribe, fiercely independent, their culture rich with tradition and warrior spirit. For a time they existed in a delicate balance with their Roman conquerors, a client kingdom led by King Prasutagus. Prasutagus was a pragmatist. He understood the overwhelming power of Rome and sought to navigate a treacherous political landscape to protect his people. He believed he had found a clever solution. In his will, he named the Emperor Nero as a co-heir alongside his own 2 daughters. He bequeathed half of his prosperous kingdom to his family and the other half to the distant, all-powerful emperor in Rome. In his mind, this was a brilliant compromise, a gesture of loyalty that would surely appease the Romans and guarantee the safety and status of his queen, Boudica, and their children. It was a desperate gamble to preserve his lineage in a sliver of Iceni independence. He could not have been more tragically mistaken. The moment news of Prasutagus' death reached Roman ears, the carefully constructed facade of cooperation shattered. The will wasn't seen as a gesture of goodwill. It was seen as an invitation. Roman officials, led by the procurator Cadistinus, descended upon the Iceni lands like vultures. The will was utterly disregarded. The kingdom wasn't shared, it was seized. Roman centurions and tax collectors swarmed through the Iceni territory. Lands that had been held by families for generations were declared Roman property. The tribes, nobles, men of high standing and proud lineage were stripped of their ancestral estates and treated like common slaves. The royal treasury, the wealth of a kingdom, was plundered and absorbed into Rome's coffers. It was a systematic and brutal dismantling of an entire society, driven by insatiable greed. But the Romans were not content with just taking the Iceni's wealth and freedom. They needed to crush their spirit to make an example of them. And they chose the most horrific, personal, and humiliating way to do it. The ultimate outrage was reserved for the royal family itself. Queen Boudica, the grieving widow of their supposedly allied king, was not treated with the respect due to her rank. She was dragged out in public and brutally flogged, her back laid bare with Roman whips. This was more than just cruelty. This was a calculated act of political terror. In Celtic culture, the honor of a leader, especially a queen, was sacred and intrinsically linked to the honor of the tribe itself. To publicly scourge her was to declare that the Iceni were less than human in Roman eyes. It was designed to break them, to grind their pride into the mud and ensure they would never again dare to dream of defiance. But for Boudica, bleeding and humiliated, something inside did not break. It ignited. The pain, the injustice, the violation of everything she held sacred didn't extinguish her spirit. It forged it into something new, something terrifying. The Romans thought they were putting out a fire. Instead, they had just thrown fuel onto a spark. As she stood there, absorbing the lashes and the jeers, the seeds of one of history's most ferocious and bloody rebellions were sown. This was not the end of the Iceni queen. It was the beginning of Boudica, the warrior, the avenger, the flame of fury that would soon set Roman Britain ablaze. The Roman brutality didn't just break a family, it shattered the fragile peace across Britain. The shockwave of their cruelty rippled through every native tribe, igniting a fury that had been smoldering for years. You see, discontent was already at a boiling point. People were being crushed under the weight of Roman taxes, forced to watch as their sacred lands were seized and their ancient gods replaced by foreign deities. Roman soldiers, meant to be peacekeepers, were seen as occupiers, a constant, despised presence. For the Iceni, this was the final, unforgivable insult. Their queen and her daughters had been publicly humiliated, their kingdoms stolen. Their rage was a wildfire, and it found dry tinder in their neighbors, the Trinovantes. The Trinovantes had their own deep grievances. Their capital, Camulodunum, what we now call Colchester, had been stolen from them and turned into a retirement community for Roman legionaries. A colonia, a massive, arrogant temple to the deified Emperor Claudius, was built right on top of their sacred ground, a daily reminder of their subjugation. Into this powder keg stepped a figure of legend, Boudica, the Roman historian Cassius Dio, a man not prone to complimenting barbarians, described her as being possessed of greater intelligence than often belongs to women. He paints a vivid picture of her, a tall, imposing woman with a fierce, penetrating gaze and a voice that could cut through the noise of a crowd. A great mass of reddish gold hair cascaded down to her waist, a fiery banner of defiance. Around her neck she wore a heavy golden torque, the unmistakable symbol of Celtic royalty. Dressed in a vibrant, multicolored tunic and a thick cloak fastened with a brooch, she gripped a spear, not just as a weapon, but as an extension of her will. Standing before her enraged people, her voice wasn't one of sorrow, but of pure, unadulterated fury. She wasn't just a grieving mother or a deposed queen. She was the living embodiment of their collective anger. She spoke of their ancestors, who had lived and died as free people on this land. She invoked their gods, who had been dishonored by the invaders. She laid bare the unbearable shame the Romans had inflicted upon them all, not just her family. She reminded them that Roman promises were lies, that their so-called civilization was built on theft and violence. Her rallying cry was simple, powerful, and terrifying. It wasn't a plea for negotiation or a request for better terms. It was a call for vengeance, absolute, total, and bloody vengeance. She declared that they would either win back their freedom or die trying. There was no middle ground, no going back. This was a war for survival, a war to reclaim their very soul. And the people listened. From across the lowlands of eastern England, the scattered tribes began to answer the call. The Trinovantes, the Iceni, and others, all weary of Roman arrogance and oppression, began to gather. They weren't a professional army like the legions they were about to face. They were farmers, craftsmen, and herders. They came armed with what they had: long, iron-tipped spears, brightly painted wooden shields, and in their hearts, a sheer burning hatred that had been simmering for a generation. A storm was gathering, an army of vengeance coalescing around a warrior queen. The Romans in Britain had sown the wind, and they were about to reap the whirlwind. While the Roman governor Suetonius Paulinus was busy dealing with druids on the island of Anglesey, a storm was brewing on the mainland. This was a critical miscalculation. A queen, wronged and burning with vengeance, was about to unleash a firestorm on Roman Britain. After being brutally humiliated by the Romans, she rallied the Celtic tribes, amassing a colossal army, some say as large as 100,000 strong. Their first target, Camulodunum, today known as Colchester. This city wasn't just any settlement. It was a symbol of Roman oppression, a colony built on former tribal land. Filled with retired Roman soldiers who had grown arrogant and complacent, the city was tragically underdefended. When Boudica's horde descended, it wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. The Celts showed no mercy. They swarmed the streets, cutting down every Roman they found. The grand temple dedicated to the former Emperor Claudius, a structure meant to symbolize eternal Roman power, was set ablaze and torn down stone by stone. The entire city was put to the torch. Even today, Archaeologists digging in Colchester find a thick red layer of burnt earth from that very fire, a silent, 2,000-year-old testament to the inferno that consumed Camulodunum. Hearing the news, Governor Paulinus raced back from Anglesey with his legions. His next destination was the thriving commercial heart of the province, Londinium, modern-day London. But as he approached, he made a grim calculation. The city was too large, his forces too small. Defending it was impossible. In a brutal act of military triage, Paulinus made the heart-wrenching decision to abandon Londinium and its people to save his army. He had to think about the bigger picture, the survival of the entire province. For the citizens of Londinium, this decision was a death sentence. Boudica's army swept in, and what followed was even more horrific than the destruction of Camulodunum. The historian Tacitus paints a gruesome picture. Every Roman, and anyone who looked or acted Roman, was systematically hunted down and killed. The accounts speak of unspeakable atrocities, of a city drowned in blood before being razed to the ground. There was no plunder, no taking of prisoners. This wasn't about wealth, it was about eradication. But the wave of destruction didn't stop there. The rebellion rolled on to its next target, Verulamium, near modern-day St. Albans. This was another prosperous Romanized town, a beacon of the new order, and it suffered the exact same fate. The pattern was terrifyingly consistent. Wholesale slaughter, followed by complete and utter destruction by fire. The message was clear. Anything and everything Roman had to be erased from the land.
Oh yeah.
In just a few short weeks, Boudicca and her tribal coalition had done the unthinkable. They had destroyed 3 of the most important Roman cities in Britain. The death toll was staggering, estimated to be between 70 and 80,000 people, Romans and their allies. Rome's grip on Britain, which had seemed so absolute, was suddenly shattered. The province was on the brink of collapse, and the Roman eagle was falling from the sky. The rebellion had reached its zenith, a terrifying tide of Celtic fury. But the final, decisive confrontation with Suetonius Paulinus and his legions was still to come. The fate of Britain hung in the balance. The fate of Roman Britain hung by a thread, and the entire empire held its breath. Suetonius Paulinus, the Roman governor, found himself in a truly impossible position. He had scraped together a force of roughly 10,000 men, a mix of veteran legionaries and loyal auxiliaries. These were the hardened professionals, the very backbone of Roman military might in the province. But facing them was a terrifying spectacle, a vast, roaring Celtic horde. Numbering in the hundreds of thousands, their spirits ablaze with recent victories and a burning desire for vengeance. The sheer weight of numbers was overwhelmingly stacked against the Romans. Any mistake would mean annihilation. Knowing he couldn't win a straight fight on an open plain, Paulinus demonstrated his tactical genius. He chose his battlefield with meticulous care. He found a narrow defile, a bottleneck in the landscape, with a dense, impenetrable forest guarding his rear. This brilliant move protected his flanks and completely neutralized the Britons' greatest advantage, their ability to swarm and outflank him with their superior numbers. Furthermore, he positioned his troops on a slight incline, forcing the Celtic warriors to charge uphill, exhausting themselves before they even reached the Roman lines. It was a masterclass in turning the terrain into an ally. As Paulinus surveyed the enemy, he noticed something peculiar, something that would prove to be a fatal miscalculation by the Britons. Behind their massive army was a long, crescent-shaped line of wagons. These wagons were filled not with supplies, but with their families. Wives and children brought along to witness what they believed would be a final, glorious triumph over the hated Roman invaders. They had come to watch a spectacle, inadvertently creating a barrier that would block their own retreat. They had trapped themselves, confident of a victory that was not yet won. Among the Celtic ranks, the inspirational figure of Boudica rode in her chariot, her voice ringing out across the field. She was a towering presence, a living symbol of their rebellion. She spoke to her warriors not of tactics, but of passion. She reminded them of the atrocities committed by the Romans. The stolen lands, the humiliated nobles, and the violated women, including her own daughters. She painted a vivid, visceral picture of a future free from Roman tyranny, a glorious return to their ancestral ways. Her words were fire, stoking the flames of hatred and courage in the hearts of her people. It was a call for total war, for a fight to the death. On the other side of the valley, the atmosphere was completely different. There was no fiery passion, only cold, hard discipline. Suetonius Paulinus walked calmly before his legionaries. He didn't need to whip them into a frenzy. Instead, he spoke to them with the quiet confidence of a seasoned commander. He reminded them of their years of rigorous training, their superior equipment, the heavy shields, sharp gladius, and the proven, methodical Roman way of war. He told them to hold the line, to trust their discipline, to throw their javelins as one, and then to advance as a single, unstoppable wall of steel. He urged them to ignore the noise and the chaos, to focus on the man in front of them, and to fight for the glory of Rome and for their very survival. The stage was set. On one side, a massive wave of Celtic fury fueled by righteous anger. On the other, a small, disciplined core of Roman steel, strategically placed and ready to execute their deadly craft. It was more than a battle. It was a clash of two worlds, and the very ground of Britain was about to be soaked in blood. The final battle, likely fought somewhere along Watling Street in the Midlands, was a clash of cultures and military doctrines. The Celtic charge was furious, a wave of raw courage and rage. They surged forward, a terrifying, screaming mass. But they met the unyielding shield wall of the Roman legions. The disciplined Roman formation held. Their pila javelins rained down, breaking the Celtic charge. Then the legions advanced, their gladius short swords devastating in the close quarters. The Celts, fighting as individuals rather than a unified, disciplined force, began to break. Their vast numbers, which had been an advantage in the sieges, became a hindrance on the cramped battlefield. The lines of wagons behind them, meant for their families to watch the victory, became a trap, blocking their retreat. The slaughter was immense. Roman estimates claim 80,000 Celts fell, while Roman losses were minimal. Boudica, unwilling to be taken captive, reportedly took poison. Her daughter's fates remain unknown. The revolt was crushed, but the scars on Roman Britain were deep. Boudica's rebellion was a brutal, bloody affair that exposed the fragility of Roman control. It forced Rome to reassess its strategy in Britain, sending reinforcements and treating the remaining tribes with a slightly less heavy hand. For 1,500 years, Boudica faded from history, relegated to a brief mention in Roman texts. A barbarian queen who dared to challenge the empire. But in the Victorian era, as Britain expanded its own empire, Boudica was resurrected. She became a potent symbol of British defiance, a proto-feminist icon, and a reminder of the island's fierce, unconquerable spirit. Her statue stands proudly on Westminster Bridge, spear aloft, forever facing the Houses of Parliament. Her story reminds us that history is not just written by the victors. It is etched in the fury of the conquered, in the ashes of burned cities, and in the enduring legend of a warrior queen who, for a terrifying moment, brought an empire to its knees. She was the embodiment of defiance, a spirit unbroken by the chains of empire. Her name was Boudica, and though the centuries have buried her beneath stone and silence, her echo still rides upon the mists of Britain, fierce, unyielding, and eternal. Thank you for watching Whispered Chronicles, Echoes of Forgotten Lore. If her story stirred something ancient within you, consider joining us again, for there are countless voices still waiting to be heard from the forgotten corners of history. Until the next whisper, the next echo from the past, stay curious, stay safe.